Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Tuesday morning for a rare podcast covering tonight's 5 game slate around the association. Before we dig into the games, quick reminder, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way you get notified every time I post a new video. Also, please hit that thumbs up if you like the podcast. It goes a long way to helping my videos find themselves in the hands of other people. If you did happen to stumble across this video and you're not already following me on Twitter, my Twitter handle at Brent Hyden1 in the description down below. Please make sure you hit a follow over on the Twitter machine. While you're over there, send me a DM. Find out how you can get access to my projections, content, Discord chat, and all that good stuff for a very affordable one-time price, carrying you all the way through the playoffs. Without further ado, let's take a look at the games. First game of the night, we're going to talk about the New York Knicks at Detroit Pistons. Detroit 7-point favorites in this one, 220.5 over under. Knicks coming in on a 3-game winning streak, season best 3-game winning streak, after upsetting Boston, New Orleans, and Memphis over the last 3. So interesting there. The Pistons also winners of 6 of their last 8, knocked off Houston in overtime on Friday. So it might actually be a pretty decent game here. Tim Hardaway Jr. coming off a team high 22 points in his last outing. Tim Hardaway Jr. is someone that I have interest in this spot, going up against the Detroit Pistons strictly because he's going to play a lot of minutes. He's one of the few guys that Fizdale is messing with his minutes. He's going to play a ton, going to take a lot of shots. We know the usage is going to be there. The problem is he's rather inconsistent from time to time, but at 6,500 over on DraftKings, very affordable price for Tim Hardaway Jr. I like him in cash. I like him in tournaments. It's a decent matchup for him. He's 7K over on FanDuel. I don't like him as much over there, but he is still someone to definitely consider in this spot. I will say, looking at the Knicks point guard situation, it's really hard to trust either one of these guys, especially with Fizdale being rather fickle with the guys. But Detroit ranks 25th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. It's given up 25.9 points, 6.4 rebounds, 8.8 assists, 47.4% field goal shooting, 35% from 3-point range. Definitely need to consider both of these guys here. Trey Burke, 4,700 on FanDuel, 6,100 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DK, sorry, 6,100 on FanDuel. He's a fade on FanDuel. I'm not paying 6,100 for Trey Burke in this spot. Emmanuel Mudiay is 5,700 on FanDuel. That's a little bit more palatable. I don't think you need to pay for either one of those guys over on FanDuel, though. But looking on DraftKings, where it's 4,700 and 4,500, both of these guys have been decently consistent. They've had a couple down games. Trey Burke obviously let everyone down in this matchup against New Orleans. Still played 20 minutes, just shot really poorly. That was a game where Alonzo Trier actually had a really, really solid outing. But Trey Burke still getting a decent amount of runs, still taking a lot of shots. I like him in the spot. I also really like Emmanuel Mudiay, and I'm actually going to give him a slight edge here. Coming off 2 straight really solid games, still playing in the mid to upper 20s, still taking a decent amount of shots, moving the ball decently well, but I give him the slight edge here because 42% of his shots come at the rim. Detroit's allowing opponents to shoot 70% at the rim. Another 23% of his shots are coming in the paint, where opponents are shooting 41% against Detroit. Projections do give the slight edge to Trey Burke in this spot because he is just a better producer as far as per minute basis, per possession basis. But I still think, personally, I'm going to lean towards Mudiay being a guy that I have the more interest in, and I think he's going to be a little less chalky than Trey Burke. So both of them are fine. I think in tournaments you can roll with Mudiay, and in cash games you can roll with Burke on DraftKings specifically. Yeah, I think that's how I would attack it. Looking at Enes Kanter, 30.3% of his possessions come on post-up. Detroit allowing 0.97 points per possessions on post-ups. Kanter perfectly fine in cash and in tournaments. We saw him play 41 minutes, 33 the game before that. When he gets rolling, Fizdale's going to continue to use him, and I think this is a spot where he could definitely get rolling. Taking a lot of shots at his rim. Obviously, I mentioned Detroit really struggling with rim protection. I like this spot for Enes Kanter. He's going to be a center that I have some interest in. Over on FanDuel at 7,600. I like him a decent amount. DraftKings 6,800, still a really solid play here. I actually project him to be a really, really, really good play. You're just taking a little bit of risk, but I still really, really like him. Noah Vonleh, not someone that I have a ton of interest in, but he's fine in cash. I think he's going to be popular given the games that he's had recently. He obviously struggled with foul trouble against Memphis, but the three prior games, over 40 fantasy points. I think he's going to be popular, so cash viable for sure. I would be looking elsewhere in tournaments. And again, I mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr. perfectly fine in all formats, and I'm not going anywhere else here. I'm not going to try to chase the Alonzo Trier games. On FanDuel, you can roll him out as one of your value options. That's perfectly fine at 3,700 because you are expecting his score to potentially be dropped. Looking at the Detroit side of things, it pretty much starts and ends with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. Taking a look over at the projections as soon as my Excel sheet comes back up. It froze up for some reason. Both of those guys project to be really, really, really good options here. The Knicks do rank 20th in defensive efficiency against centers. They're giving up 16 second chance points per game and 41.4 points in the paint. Andre Drummond should go absolutely bananas here. Projects for 49 DraftKings points, 50 FanDuel points. Really, really good value here on both sites. But Blake Griffin actually projects to be a slightly better play and a slightly better value. Ranks out as one of the top plays on the slate. Just cheaper, on both sites here. And a very similar smash spot to Drummond. New York ranks 26th in defensive efficiency. To power forwards, they're giving up 25.1 points, 11.4 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 48% shooting from the floor. Griffin leads the team in usage, 28.6%. 25% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes, where the Knicks are allowing opponents to shoot 38.1%. I prefer Blake Griffin here. I really, really like him in all formats, cash and GPPs. I would have exposure to either Drummond or Griffin, one of the two. Again, I prefer Blake Griffin because he is slightly cheaper on both sites. Looking at Reggie Jackson profiles, perfectly fine as a mid-range cash tournament option. Has been playing relatively well recently with 30 fantasy points in back-to-back games, taking a decent amount of shots. Minutes are trending in the right direction. Don't know if that continues, but Reggie Jackson at 5,400 in a really solid spot. Langston Galloway is someone that you can consider on DraftKings in tournaments and FanDuel in cash or GPPs as a drop your score option. And then Reggie Bullock is perfectly fine in cash. He's still just playing a lot of minutes. Not terribly productive most nights, but getting 30 plus minutes against the Knicks, that is appealing tonight. Moving on, a little bit more appealing matchup here. Atlanta at Miami. Miami 7-point favorites, 220.5 over under in this one. Lots of injuries in this game. And we're going to take a look at the Atlanta side first, but Alex Poythress is out. Tyler Dorsey is out. Bazemore and Lynn are both probable. Tyler Johnson and Goran Dragic are both ruled out for this game. Atlanta allowing a league worst 118.6 points per contest. They're scoring just 107.7 points per game. That's very, very troubling. Trae Young, 6th in the NBA in assists at 7.7 per game. Leads the Hawks at 15.7 points per game. He's shooting just 38.3% from the field. This is actually a pretty okay spot, I guess, for Trae Young. Doesn't project to be a great value, but he is 6,600 on DraftKings, 7K over on FanDuel. I like him in tournaments. The one saving grace is Miami is allowing opponents to shoot 36.6% on above the break threes. Trae Young, 36% of his shots are above the break threes. Miami also struggling a little bit in isolation and against the pick and roll ball handler. 14% of Young's possessions come in isolation, 29.3 come as the pick and roll ball handler. And taking a look at his game log, you can see actually against the Heat last time these teams played, 24 points, 15 assists, 6 rebounds. 6,600 for Trae Young. I really like him in tournaments. He's a pretty good option on FanDuel in tournaments as well. The rest of this team, though, it's really unappealing strictly because Lloyd Pierce has come out and said he's okay with playing 12, 13 players per night. And that really that screws things up, especially on the wings, because that's where they have the most depth. Obviously, with Tyler Dorsey being out, that takes one body away, but Tyler Dorsey, not someone that really does a whole lot or plays much other than like some point guard minutes. They still have Bazemore, they still have Herter, they still have Justin Anderson, they still have Vince Carter who plays some on the wing, they still have Bembry, they still have a lot of bodies. If I were forced to pick anyone from the wings in this game, it would be Taurean Prince. That's, I talked about Miami struggling against the pick and roll ball handler and in isolation. That is a slight boost to Taurean Prince. Projects to be an okay value, 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. I'm fine with him in tournaments. If you sprinkled in Bembry or Bazemore or something like that in one of your tournament lineups, if you're building a bunch of tournament lineups, that's fine. I'm not going to say no to any of those guys. Just no one profiles is a really great option here. And again, when you're dealing with the coach that says he's completely happy playing 12 or 13 guys, I think there's better places to look tonight. John Collins is definitely interesting coming off, another solid game. 45 fantasy points played. He's played 30 minutes in back-to-back games. As long as he stays out of foul trouble, he has double-double upside. He has monster upside. So I'm fine with him in cash and in tournaments. Miami does rank 18th in defensive efficiency to power forwards, giving up 22.1 points and 10 rebounds per game to them. So it's a fine spot for Collins. And then you can look at Dedmon and Lynn, like in cash or tournaments, just where they fit your lineup. But neither one of them is someone that I'm really dying to get exposure to. Alex Lynn is really cheap. He does have potential to get on top of that salary. So in tournaments, I'm fine with some Alex Lynn, especially on like FanDuel, where center's not the greatest position tonight. And if you're fading the top end stuff, you can, punt with Alex Lynn. Jeremy Lin is still fine in cash. I would look elsewhere in tournaments. Given how good he has been recently, ownership will probably flock to him there. Looking at the Miami side of things, this is where I have the most interest, obviously, because we talked about it. Atlanta giving up a lot of points per game. Miami is really shorthanded with Tyler Johnson and Goran Dragic both being out. Hassan Whiteside, 24.6% usage rate and 1.60 fantasy points per minute without Tyler Johnson and without Goran Dragic on the floor. Obviously, Hassan Whiteside has been a huge disappointment recently, coming off of 12 minutes against the Raptors for personal fouls in that time, playing limited minutes against Chicago. Still had a good game. Monster game against Brooklyn. Of course, everyone goes off against Brooklyn. Struggled against the Lakers. The minutes should be there for him as long as he stays out of foul trouble. I currently have him projected for about 25, 26 minutes because Bam Adebayo has been playing really well the past few games. He could eat into some of Whiteside's minutes. I still think Whiteside is the top, play from this side of the game. You can use him in cash. I think it's perfectly fine to expect him to have a really solid game. More of a tournament option, though, because there is some risk with him. But Atlanta ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to centers. They're giving up 20.6 points, 16.1 rebounds. They're really struggling with 17.4 second chance points allowed. That makes Whiteside someone that I have a lot of interest in. Josh Richardson is my second favorite option among the starters. He owns a 25.3% usage rate, 0.92 fantasy points per minute without Dragic and Tyler Johnson. 8 from 17 from three-point range over the last couple games. He's going to take a lot of shots. He's going to play a lot of minutes. He's going to handle the ball a decent amount. I have a lot of interest in Josh Richardson. He's someone that I would be getting exposure to, especially in cash. This is a spot where I don't think you want to fade Josh Richardson in cash against the Hawks. After him, I really, really love Dwayne Wade coming off a monster game. But he's a guy without those guys on the floor. 1.24 fantasy points per minute, 32% usage rate. He's going to shoot a ton. Hopefully he plays 29, 30 minutes here in the spot. It's a great matchup for him. He's a core option for me just at that price coming off a monster game. Probably going to be popular. I'm fine with that though. He's still really cheap across the industry, 53, 5,500. I love Dwayne Wade in all formats. And then Justice Winslow is perfectly fine. We saw him have a monster game against the Hawks when these two teams played last time. We actually had Goran Dragic out, but Tyler Johnson played in that game, if I recall correctly. Yeah, Tyler Johnson played in that game, but Justice Winslow had a triple-double. He's still playing a lot of minutes. There's still plenty of upside for him. So, he had a near triple-double. I still like Justice Winslow a lot in this spot too. I would be getting a lot of exposure to Miami. That's all it really comes down to. You can roll Magruder. You can roll Wayne Ellington. Ellington appealing on DraftKings 4,100. Magruder appealing on both sites just as another mid-range option. Moving on. Toronto-Memphis. Toronto 4.5-point favorites, 206 over-under in this game. I don't really have interest outside of a couple of plays here. Memphis ranks in or near the top 10 in defensive efficiency against every position. Kawhi Leonard, always someone that you can consider. 9,400 on DraftKings. I just don't really want to go there tonight. He's just not someone I have a lot of interest in. You can roll him in cash because he does have a 29% usage rate and he is matchup proof. That's pretty much all I can say here. Jonas Valanciunas should get the start, actually. Cheap enough to consider in tournaments. He has a double-double in back-to-back games. Or two of the last three, sorry. So he's fine in tournaments. Again, no one really projects to be a great play here outside of Kawhi Leonard, but he's just expensive. Projects for about 40 fantasy points. It's just really expensive. I think there's better places to look tonight. Surge can be used in cash. That's pretty much it from the Toronto side. Memphis side is slightly more appealing. I will say that looking at Mike Conley and Marc Gasol specifically, Toronto does struggle to defend the pick and roll. They are giving up 0.97 points per possession to the pick and roll ball handler. Obviously, Mike Conley, almost 40% of his possessions come in the pick and roll as the ball handler. He's 7,700 on DraftKings, very appealing there as a cash option. 8,800 on FanDuel, little less appealing, more of a tournament play there. I really like Marc Gasol in the spot too. 8,900 on DraftKings, pretty appealing in tournaments. 10K on FanDuel, not very appealing. FanDuel pricing is absolute shit. I don't know why people continue to play on that site. It's just terrible. Yeah, but if you're playing Conley, I would probably pair him with Gasol in the spot. You know, a lot of the pick and roll stuff does operate with Marc Gasol, so a good way to get some tournament exposure there. Toronto's transition defense is not very good, which gives a boost to Kyle Anderson and Garrett Temple. 39% of Anderson's shots come in the mid-range. Toronto's allowing 43.2% shooting in the mid-range. Kyle Anderson at 4,800 on DraftKings is somewhat appealing. Kyle Anderson at 6,100 on FanDuel, not appealing. Moving on, because that game sucks. Lakers at Denver, now a little bit more appealing game. Denver, 4-point favorites, 214.5 over under. Gary Harris, the only injury news to keep an eye on. He is questionable. Defensively speaking, this is a somewhat tough spot for the Lakers. Denver really solid defense, 103.8 defensive rating over the past 5 games, 103.2 on the season. but it's LeBron. 10-9 for LeBron is way too cheap on DraftKings. 11-2 on FanDuel is still really, really good. I love him in cash. I like him in tournaments. If you feel obligated to pay up for somebody, it would be LeBron. Denver is allowing opposing small forwards to shoot almost 40% from three. That's a pretty big boost to LeBron. He's going to take some threes, 5, 6 threes. It's a good spot for him. He's still playing a ton of minutes, still high usage. I love LeBron in all formats. This is a spot where I will probably be getting exposure. Kyle Kuzma, the next guy I have interest in here, broke out against the Magic. Pretty decent spot given his price. 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. Again, it's not the greatest of matchups, but that price is just really appealing. So I like Kyle Kuzma in cash, and I like him in tournaments. Still 22% usage rate on the season. Nothing to write home about, but perfectly fine in all formats. Brandon Ingram is a good tournament option. Lonzo is fine in tournaments. He has double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games. This would be a spot where he definitely could have some success. He is more appropriately priced on DraftKings at 5,600. Of course, FanDuel 6,700, not as appealing, but you can roll him out in tournaments on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you can roll him out in cash on DraftKings. Lance and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are two guys to consider on FanDuel as tournament options. You could use them on DraftKings as tournament options too if you just need the value. Lance at 3,400 is somewhat appealing in this spot. Looking at the Denver side of things, where things get more appealing, there is a little bit of narrative. Jamal Murray, the whole Lakers and Jamal Murray thing, that has me somewhat interested in him. But also, the Lakers do allow opposing point guards to shoot 37% from three, which is a pretty big boost to Jamal Murray, who is taking a lot of shots from three. 30% of his shots come from three-point range. So, yeah, that's pretty appealing here. They're allowing 1.02 points per possession in isolation, which is a pretty big boost to Murray, who operates in isolation about 11% of the time. And also, his assist numbers have been really solid recently. So I really like Jamal Murray. Has been playing really, really well. 6,900 on DraftKings, cash and tournaments for sure. Looking over at FanDuel, he's probably like 14K because their pricing is atrocious. 7,300. That's a pretty fair price for Jamal Murray. So I'm okay with him in cash and tournaments there. I absolutely love Nikola Jokic. The Lakers, we watched what happened with Vucevic. Vucevic went ham on them. They rank 30th in defensive efficiency to centers, giving up 27.7 points, 17.1 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 53% shooting from the floor. High usage big men have just obliterated them. The Lakers, they really struggle on post-ups, allowing 1.06 points per possession. Jokic is posting up about 25% of the time. Nikola Jokic, a fantastic cash game and tournament option, someone that I'm going to be building around. He is going to be a core option for me. I really like Paul Millsap in this spot too. The biggest downside to Paul Millsap is, one, he doesn't play a ton of minutes, not going to play more than 30 minutes most nights, but he's still really, really productive in those limited minutes. It is a really good matchup for him. 5,900 on DraftKings, cash and tournaments for sure. 6,400. I'd probably reserve him for cash. Harris is fine on DK for cash games if he plays because he's 5,600. He's too expensive on FanDuel, and he's small forward eligible over there. Beasley would be someone to keep an eye on if Harris misses this game. Had a really solid outing against the Thunder whenever he got the start for Gary Harris. Didn't play a ton of minutes, only played 13, but was pretty productive in those 13 minutes. He would be someone, if he got hot from the floor, you could definitely consider. Juancho Hernan-Gomez, a guy that I still like him in tournaments, playing a lot of minutes. You can roll him out in cash. He's just very reliant on scoring for the most part, so not someone I have a ton of interest in. Same thing with like Trey Lyles and Monte Morris. Both are perfectly fine in cash. Both are perfectly fine in tournaments. Trey Lyles, 3,800 across the industry. Really, really solid punt option. Monte Morris continues to play a decent amount of minutes. So one that I always have interest in. Moving on to Indiana at Phoenix. This game, very, very appealing. Indiana, 2.5-point favorites coming in on a back-to-back, leaving Utah, coming to Phoenix. Victor Oladipo is out. So, yeah, that makes this game something that we definitely want to get some exposure to. Coming off the Pacers' 33-point win against Utah. It's pretty impressive without Oladipo. That is really, really impressive. But taking a look at the projections, you can see just about everyone from Indiana in a good spot here. Aaron Holiday, 4,800 on FanDuel. Again, what the hell are you doing with your pricing, FanDuel? This is ridiculous. Aaron Holiday, fine in tournaments, fine in cash on FanDuel, I guess, if you're dying to pay really, really high price for a guy with a limited ceiling. 3,600 on DraftKings. One of my favorite value plays just because he's, averaging over a fantasy point per minute. Whenever he gets the run, he's productive. He got 21 minutes last night, going to play right around 21, 22 minutes most likely. Going to be in a prime matchup against the Suns, who really struggle to defend everything. They're just bad against everybody. So Aaron Holiday, my favorite value play on the slate. Looking at the rest of this team, I'm going to go back to Tyreke Evans one more time. Still not going to play more than 30 minutes, but he's still taking a ton of shots when he's on the floor. He can get you some assists, can notch some steals against the Phoenix Suns. Again, this should be a faster paced game, a little bit faster, against a really, really bad defense. I really like Tyreke Evans in pretty much all formats. 49% of his shots come at the rim. Phoenix is allowing opponents to shoot 67.7% at the rim. 18% of his shots come in the mid-range. Phoenix allowing opponents to shoot 44.6% in the mid-range. They also struggle in isolation. 11% of Tyreek's possessions come in isolation. I'm definitely going to get some exposure to Tyreke Evans in cash and in tournaments. I really, really, really love Sabonis off the bench here. Just touches the ball so much, is so involved in the offense whenever you have Tyreke Evans in the starting lineup. This is another spot where Sabonis should just go bananas. Double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games. The assist numbers we can see are starting to get up there. Foul trouble, a little bit of a concern. He can't keep his hands to himself. But this is a spot, again, Phoenix, second fantasy points allowed to centers. Sabonis going to play a decent amount of minutes. Sabonis, I love him in cash. I love him in tournaments. Going to be someone that I want to get some exposure to. Miles Turner is perfectly fine as well. Turner projects to be a pretty solid value. He's really, really cheap. Across the industry, 5,500 on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel. Still just going to play in the mid-20s. Might be lucky to get 30 minutes, but in a very good matchup. I like Miles Turner a significant amount as well. I really love Darren Collison. Phoenix giving up 44.6% shooting in the mid-range. Collison takes 35% of his shots in the mid-range. Saw him coming off a really, really solid game last night. 4,400. Don't ask me why Corey Joseph is more expensive than Darren Collison, but Darren Collison, someone that I have a lot of interest in as well. Very fairly priced across the industry, 4,400 and 4,900. Perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. Bojan Bogdanovic is someone that's, when I started doing my research, I didn't have a ton of interest in, but coming in, he has 8 straight games of at least 15 real points, 4,900 against the Suns. Bojan Bogdanovic, someone that I think we definitely need to be looking at here. 5,500 on FanDuel. I still really like the price for him. Nate McMillan talked about needing to get the ball into his hands more, and that has me really, really interested in Bogdanovic here. Sees about a 3% usage boost without Oladipo on the floor. So Bogdanovic, someone that I'm going to have a lot of exposure to in this spot. Someone else taking a decent amount of shots in the mid-range. So that's really appealing here. 15% of his shots come on corner threes. Phoenix allowing 41.3% shooting on corner threes. So Bogdanovic, someone that I really, really, really like in the spot. Thaddeus Young is fine too. Pretty much all of Indiana is in play. Thad Young, really, really cheap as well. Going to play more minutes than he did last night. It is a really good matchup for him. I don't know that I want to chase McDermott here, but in tournaments at 3,200, that's pretty appealing. 3,700 on FanDuel. You can take a shot on some Dougie McBuckets. Flipping over to the Phoenix side of things, it's a little less appealing, but there are still a couple spots where I think we can get some exposure. Obviously, Indiana's defense does take a little bit of a hit, not having one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA playing. Booker, absolutely love him here. Still appropriately priced, 8,600 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. Going to do a lot of ball handling, has over 40 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4, taking a little bit of a larger role in the offense. 39% of his possessions come in the pick and roll. Indiana allowing 0.94 points per possession in the pick and roll. I love Devin Booker in cash and in tournaments. Going to be someone that I have a decent amount of interest in. 22% of Trevor Ariza's shots are corner threes this season. Indiana is allowing opponents to shoot 50% on corner threes. Trevor Ariza, 5,300 on DraftKings, still playing a ton of minutes. Trevor Ariza, 4,800 on FanDuel, way too cheap. I love Trevor Ariza in the spots. It is a pretty good spot for him. I mean, he does have 30-plus fantasy point upside. He has shown it in some spots already this season. I'm going to get a lot of exposure to Trevor Ariza here. Bridges is fine as a cash value or a tournament value. Warren and Ayton, both guys that I think you can get some tournament exposure to. Neither really jumps off the page as a guy that I want to force into my lineups, though. And then Rashawn Holmes, someone that you can roll out in tournaments on DraftKings, hoping that he gets maybe a couple extra minutes. He's still probably going to get you 15, 16 minutes, and you're kind of hoping for some DeAndre Ayton foul trouble and he can get a little bit of extra run, but he's still producing really solid numbers in limited minutes. So Holmes is fine as a value option here. And that does it. That's the entire slate. Sorry, this took a little bit longer than I expected, but good luck in all your contests. Now I will be back tomorrow.